crash of porcelain against the floor reverberated through the grand hall, the delicate cup shattering into countless fragments. The sharp sound silenced the murmurs, leaving a tense quiet in its wake. Concubine Bai's hand trembled with rage, her face contorted in fury. Kneeling at the center of the room was Princess Meixiu. Her head was bowed low, her palms pressed against the cold marble floor, yet her defiance simmered beneath the surface. Around her stood a circle of watching eyes, concubines, princesses, and the Queen Mother herself, their expressions ranging from scornful amusement to thinly veiled disdain. "Look at her," Princess Xinyi said, her voice dripping with mockery as she stepped forward. Her crimson robe swept the floor with each deliberate step, a picture of controlled elegance. Feigning innocence, as always. "Meixiu, even now, you refuse to admit your guilt? How shameless." Meixiu lifted her head, her dark eyes meeting Xinyi's with quiet determination. "I have done nothing wrong," she said, her tone measured yet firm. "Your accusation holds no truth." "No truth?" Xinyi's fan snapped shut with a sharp sound. "And yet the sacred incense burners at the shrine were tampered with. Who else but you was seen lingering near them before the ceremony? Or do you intend to accuse the servants of negligence to save yourself?" "I was overseeing the preparations to ensure they were done properly," Meixiu replied, her voice calm despite the tension in the room. "That is my duty as a princess. Or would you prefer that I shirk my responsibilities like others?" A ripple of gasps and low murmurs filled the hall. Xinyi's face darkened, her fan trembling in her hand as she glared at Meixiu. "Enough," the Queen Mother, Lady Zhu, interjected, her voice sharp and cold. She sat at the head of the room, her regal presence commanding silence. Her gaze bore into Meixiu, unyielding and filled with disdain. "Do not twist your words to shift the blame, child. You are the disgrace here. Just like your mother." The insult struck like a dagger. Meixiu's knuckles whitened as her hands pressed harder into the floor, but she did not flinch. She forced herself to meet the Queen Mother's gaze. "My mother was a woman of honor," she said, her voice steady though her heart burned with anger. "She would never condone treachery, and neither would I." Concubine Bai laughed, the sound brittle and mocking. "Honor? A convenient word for the daughter of a consort who clawed her way into favor." Meixiu remained silent, her nails digging into her palms as whispers of agreement rippled around her. Her mother's absence was a wound no time could heal, leaving her vulnerable to the attacks of those who relished her isolation. "If you speak the truth, where's your proof?" Xinyi demanded, her tone triumphant. "Without it, you have no right to demand justice." "I do not need proof to defend my integrity," Meixiu replied, her voice unwavering. "If the accusation lacks evidence, it is nothing but slander." "Arrogance," Xinyi spat. "As expected from you." "Enough." Lady Zhu's voice cut through the rising tension, her tone icy. She rose from her seat, her movements measured and deliberate. "Meixiu, you bring shame to the royal family with your defiance. You should have learned humility by now, but it seems the faults of your mother run deep in your blood." The room fell silent, the weight of the Queen Mother's words pressing down on Meixiu like an iron chain. She lowered her head, her nails biting into her palms to keep herself composed. "If you deem me guilty, Your Majesty, I accept your judgment," Meixiu said softly, her voice devoid of emotion. "But I will not confess to a crime I did not commit." Lady Zhu's lips curled into a disdainful smile. "Defiant to the end. Guards, take her to the side chamber. She will remain there until the Emperor returns to decide her fate." The guards stepped forward, their hands firm but not rough as they lifted Meixiu to her feet. She moved without resistance, her head held high despite the storm of whispers that followed her departure. As the heavy doors of the side chamber closed behind her, the oppressive silence offered no solace. Meixiu's chest tightened, the weight of isolation pressing down on her. For a moment, she allowed herself to close her eyes, her resolve hardening with every breath. If no one would stand by her, she would stand alone. And she would find the truth, no matter what it cost. The guards escorted Meixiu through the dimly lit corridor, their heavy boots echoing against the stone walls. Their grip on her arms was firm, though not harsh, but the weight of her situation hung heavy in the air. Meixiu's expression remained composed, though her mind raced with thoughts of what awaited her. Just as they reached the stairwell leading to the side chamber, a clear, authoritative voice broke the silence. "Stop." The guards halted instantly. They turned to see one of the emperor's chief eunuchs standing at the end of the corridor, his elegant robes catching the faint torchlight. His presence alone commanded respect, and his sharp eyes swept over the scene with practiced precision. "The emperor has summoned Princess Meixiu," the eunuch announced without preamble. "Release her at once." The guards exchanged uneasy glances. One of them hesitated before stepping forward. "Sir, the Queen Mother instructed us to." "Do you mean to defy His Majesty's will?" The eunuch interrupted, his tone calm but icy. His gaze bore into the guards, leaving no room for argument. The guards faltered, their grips loosening. "Of course not, sir," one mumbled, bowing his head. "Good," the eunuch said smoothly. He turned his sharp gaze toward Meixiu, his expression unreadable. "Come, Your Highness. His Majesty awaits." Meixiu stood tall, brushing off the invisible weight of the guard's hands. Her dark eyes flickered with curiosity and wariness as she stepped forward, following the eunuch. Meanwhile, the guards lingered, uncertainty etched across their faces. The eunuch, noticing their hesitation, halted abruptly and turned on his heel. "Perhaps there is confusion regarding the emperor's authority. I will clarify it." He strode back down the corridor with measured steps, returning to the grand hall where the Queen Mother and the others still sat. Their laughter had resumed, an air of smug satisfaction filling the room. The eunuch's arrival silenced them at once. He did not bow deeply, as others might, but inclined his head respectfully. "Your Majesty, Queen Mother," he said, his voice smooth yet firm, "His Majesty has summoned Princess Meixiu. She is to attend him without delay." The Queen Mother's face hardened. "Summoned?" she echoed, her voice dripping with disbelief. "Why would His Majesty summon her now?" "That is not for me to question," the eunuch replied, his expression unchanging. However, the Emperor was clear in his instructions. "If there are grievances, Your Majesty is free to raise them directly with him. But any delay in presenting the princess will only anger His Majesty." The Queen Mother's eyes narrowed, her displeasure evident. "And you presume to lecture me on the Emperor's authority?" "I presume nothing," the eunuch said smoothly, his hands folded neatly before him. "I merely serve as his voice. Surely, Your Majesty would not wish to appear as though she doubts his judgment." The hall fell into a tense silence. Concubine Bei's smug expression faltered, and Princess Xinyi glanced nervously at her mother. The Queen Mother's grip on her armrest tightened, but she eventually waved a dismissive hand. "Take her, then," she said coldly. "If the Emperor wishes to involve himself in this trivial matter, let him." "Of course, Your Majesty," the eunuch said with a faint smile. He turned on his heel and departed, his robes swishing softly against the polished floor. Meixiu waited just outside the hall, her face impassive as the eunuch approached her. He nodded for her to follow, and together, they walked toward the Emperor's chambers.